The warning lights in Michael Grant's cockpit blared with relentless urgency. "Damn it," he shouted over the noise, gripping the joystick with one hand while the other danced over the console. The starfighter shuddered violently as it descended through the atmosphere, its battered hull barely holding together. Flames streaked past the canopy as the ground grew closer. Michael's voice crackled into his helmet's comm, "Control, I'm going down. I repeat, I'm going down." But only static answered. He was too far out, isolated after the ambush that had scattered his squadron. The planet loomed below, a swirl of green and brown with no visible signs of civilization. His flight path plunged straight toward the dense jungle. The ship groaned one final time before he slammed the eject button. A rush of compressed air and a bone-jarring jolt hurled him free of the cockpit, the fighter spinning away into fiery oblivion. Michael's parachute deployed in a violent snap, yanking him upward as the ground rushed to meet him. The final moments were a blur. Trees loomed large, branches whipped against his suit, and then the earth collided with his body in a heavy, disorienting thud. For a moment, all was still. Michael's head swam and his breathing rasped through the helmet's filters. He groaned, rolling onto his back to stare at the sky. Smoke trailed from where his starfighter had crashed, a thin black line against the green canopy. He lay there stunned, taking in the fact that he was still alive. Before long, instinct took over. He unlatched the harness, struggled to his feet, and surveyed the jungle around him. Trees towered above, their trunks twisting in alien patterns. Bright flowers and unfamiliar plants crowded the forest floor, creating a vibrant, almost surreal environment. Birds, or something like them, chirped in the distance. "Better than being dead," Michael muttered, brushing dirt from his suit. His right leg throbbed, likely bruised, but nothing felt broken. He adjusted the survival pack strapped to his back and took stock of his surroundings. A faint trail of smoke marked where the fighter had gone down. If there were any supplies left, he'd need them. With cautious steps, Michael headed toward the crash site. Each footfall was muffled by the thick underbrush, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and strange blooms. He kept his hand close to the sidearm at his hip. Alone on an uncharted planet, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. The wreckage wasn't far. What remained of the starfighter was a twisted heap of metal embedded in the soil, small fires still licking at the edges. The cockpit was completely destroyed and the wings lay crumpled and scattered. Michael grimaced. Whatever he'd hoped to salvage was likely gone. He carefully approached, scanning for anything usable. The emergency kit was mangled beyond recognition and the comm system was a melted husk. He cursed under his breath. Without long-range communication, he'd have to rely on his suit's limited shortwave transmitter, a poor option at best. Still, it was better than nothing. As he sifted through the debris, the jungle seemed to grow quieter. The chirps and rustles faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Michael froze, his hand on a piece of shattered paneling. He felt it before he saw it, eyes on him. He slowly turned, reaching for his weapon. They emerged from the shadows of the trees, tall, slender figures with shimmering skin that seemed to shift between colors in the dappled sunlight. Their eyes were large, luminous, and unreadable. They carried weapons, long, spear-like tools with edges that glinted faintly and moved with a grace that spoke of both discipline and familiarity with their surroundings. Michael raised his hand slowly. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his voice measured. "Just trying to survive." The aliens didn't respond. They spread out, forming a loose semicircle around him. Their faces were impassive, but their posture was alert, ready. Michael kept his weapon holstered, hoping to avoid escalating the situation. His heart pounded as he scanned their ranks, looking for some indication of intent. One figure stepped forward, slightly smaller than the rest but clearly in a position of authority. Their skin had a silver hue and they carried themselves with an air of calm control. The alien raised a hand, palm outward, and spoke a series of melodic, unrecognizable sounds. "I don't understand," Michael said, his hands still raised. He gestured to himself. "Human. I'm human. My ship crashed, I mean no harm." The silver-skinned alien tilted their head, studying him. They glanced at one of their companions, who produced a strange device, a small, glowing orb that pulsed gently. The leader held it up and Michael could feel a faint vibration in his chest as if the device was attuning itself to his presence. "Why are you here?" the alien asked, their voice now distorted but understandable. The device had translated their words, though it still retained a musical quality. Michael exhaled, lowering his hands slightly. "It wasn't intentional. My ship malfunctioned. I crashed here." The alien studied him for a long moment, then said something to the others. They lowered their weapons but remained wary. Michael felt a slight easing of tension but knew he wasn't out of danger yet. I just need time to repair my gear and figure out a way to contact my people, he continued. I'm not a threat. The silver alien's expression didn't change, but they nodded once. They gestured for him to follow, and the group began moving through the jungle. Michael hesitated before trailing after them. He had little choice, either go with them or risk being left to fend for himself on an alien world with no allies and no resources. The walk was silent except for the rustling of leaves and the soft crunch of soil underfoot. Michael tried to remember the terrain, noting landmarks and the general direction they were heading. He wasn't sure what these aliens wanted, but if he had to escape, he needed to know his surroundings. Eventually, the group reached a clearing where a cluster of structures stood. The buildings were made of smooth, organic materials that seemed to grow naturally from the ground. They gleamed faintly in the sunlight, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns. The tribe's members moved about the clearing, some carrying goods, others tending to tasks that Michael couldn't identify. As the group approached, many of them stopped to stare, their eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and something else. Reverence, perhaps, though Michael couldn't be sure. He was led into one of the larger structures, where a group of elders sat in a circle. They regarded him silently as he entered, their eyes as piercing and inscrutable as those of the warriors who had found him. The silver aliens spoke to them in their language, gesturing to Michael as they explained the situation. Michael waited, uncertain of what would happen next. The elders murmured among themselves, their tones low and thoughtful. Finally, one of them gestured for him to sit. Michael hesitated, then complied, lowering himself onto a smooth, cool surface that served as a seat. "We have not seen one like you before," one of the elders said, their voice carrying the same melodic distortion as the silver aliens. "I'm from another world," Michael said carefully. "I didn't mean to intrude. My ship was damaged, and I had no choice but to land here." The elder nodded slowly. "Our seers spoke of a being from the stars, one who would come in a vessel of fire." Michael frowned. "I'm not here because of any prophecy. I just need time to." The elder raised a hand, silencing him. "Whether by fate or chance you are here, and now we must decide what is to be done." The tension in the room was palpable. Michael sat still, his thoughts racing. He needed to find a way to gain their trust, to prove he wasn't a threat. But first, he had to understand these people, their beliefs, their culture, and why they seemed to regard him as more than just an outsider. As the discussion continued, Michael caught a glimpse of a figure near the back of the room. A young alien woman, her skin a soft blue-green, watched him intently. Unlike the others, her gaze wasn't cold or distant. It was curious, even kind. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. In that brief moment, Michael felt a spark of connection. He didn't know who she was or why she stood apart from the others, but something about her gave him hope. He turned his attention back to the elders, ready to face whatever decision they made, because now he had something to hold on to, however small it might be. Michael stood by the river's edge, watching the water ripple under the filtered sunlight that barely broke through the jungle canopy. He had been given a small woven shelter near the main village clearing and enough space to come and go as long as he didn't venture too far. The tribe's warriors still kept an eye on him, but their presence had become less menacing, more curious. Avara stepped into view carrying a basket filled with a mix of alien fruits and roots. She paused when she saw him, her large, luminous eyes narrowing slightly. "You shouldn't wander alone," she said in her soft, melodic voice. Michael turned, lifting a brow. "I'm not wandering. Just looking." Avara tilted her head, clearly skeptical. She set the basket down and crossed her arms. "Your kind always look, but you never see. What's that supposed to mean?" She crouched by the riverbank, dipping her hands into the water. "You look at the surface, the colors, the strange trees, but you don't understand what's beneath." Her voice carried a hint of impatience, as if she had said these words before, perhaps to someone else who didn't belong. Michael watched her for a moment before sitting down on a moss-covered rock nearby. "Maybe that's why I'm here," he said. "To learn. If you're willing to teach me, that is." Avara's hands stilled in the water, and she glanced over her shoulder at him. For the first time, her expression softened, though she quickly masked it. "I've seen your kind's machines. You learn only to take." "Not all of us," Michael replied. "I didn't choose to be here. I crashed. My people don't even know where I am. He hesitated, searching for the right words. I need to understand how to survive here. She regarded him carefully, then rose to her feet. If you want to learn, you will start as a child does. Follow me. Michael didn't argue. He pushed himself up and fell in step behind her, ducking under low-hanging branches as they moved deeper into the jungle. Avara led him to a clearing where two other aliens were working on a structure. One was tall and broad, with skin that shimmered like polished bronze. The other was slightly shorter, more slender, with a greenish hue. They were assembling what looked like a storage platform using vines and polished wooden beams. These are Rayan and Vecker, Avara said. They build. They know the ways of the forest. Rayan paused, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked Michael up and down, then grunted. Another Starwalker who thinks he's special? Avara shot him a sharp look. He's not one of the others. He's different. Different how? Vecker asked, his tone lighter but no less curious. He wants to learn, Avara said simply. She turned back to Michael. You will help them. Learn their ways. If you prove yourself useful, perhaps the elders will allow you to stay longer. Michael stepped forward. What do you need me to do? Rayan handed him a bundle of vines, thicker than anything Michael had seen before. Tie these to the beams. They must be tight. If they come loose, the platform will fall. Michael took the vines and nodded. Got it. He knelt beside the beam and began tying the vines into sturdy knots. His hands worked clumsily at first. He was no stranger to hard labor, but this was different. The vines were slippery, their texture unfamiliar. Rayan crouched beside him. Not like that, he said, grabbing a vine and demonstrating a complex loop and pull technique. If you tie it wrong, it won't hold. Michael watched carefully, then tried again. This time, the knot held firm. Rayan gave a short nod. Better. Avara stood nearby, arms folded, as if waiting to see how long Michael would last. Vecker worked quietly, occasionally glancing at the human with a mix of curiosity and amusement. So, how long have you two been building these platforms? Michael asked, trying to break the silence. Longer than you've been alive, Rayan said bluntly. Fair enough, Michael said with a wry smile. Maybe I'll pick it up faster than you think. Vecker chuckled. That remains to be seen. As the hours passed, Michael found himself settling into the rhythm of the work. Rayan and Vecker's instructions, though curt, were clear, and he gradually adapted to their methods. His muscles ached, and sweat dripped from his brow, but there was a strange satisfaction in the physical labor. He was starting to feel less like an outsider and more like a participant, even if only a small one. Avara returned later with food strange, brightly colored fruits that oozed a sweet, sticky juice. She handed a piece to Michael, who hesitated before taking a bite. The flavor was unlike anything he had ever tasted. Sweet, tangy, and slightly spicy. What is this? He asked. Avara's lips twitched in what might have been a faint smile. You call it a gift. He laughed. A gift? Huh? Well, thanks. Rayan and Vecker joined them, sitting on the grass to eat. The tension from earlier had eased somewhat, and the group fell into a more natural conversation. So, Vecker said, gesturing at Michael. Where are you from? Starwalker? Michael leaned back, resting his arms on his knees. A place called Earth. A planet far from here. Rayan grunted. Far enough that we've never heard of it. Yeah, Michael said. We're not exactly neighbors. I was on a mission when my ship got hit. Ended up here by accident. Avara watched him closely. Your kind's accidents often become our burdens. Michael met her gaze. Maybe, but I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to figure out how to live here. Maybe even help if you'll let me. Rayan snorted. Help? What could you possibly offer that we don't already have? Michael thought for a moment. I don't know yet, but I can learn. I'm good at that. Vecker chuckled. You've got confidence, at least. Michael smiled. Sometimes that's all you need to start. The rest of the day was spent hauling materials, tying more vines, and assembling the final parts of the platform. By the time they finished, the structure stood sturdy and solid. Rayan ran a hand along one of the beams, nodding in approval. It'll hold. Avara stepped forward, inspecting the work. She glanced at Michael. Not bad for someone who knows nothing of our ways. Michael grinned. Thanks. I think. As the sun began to set, the group gathered their tools and headed back toward the village. Michael felt a sense of accomplishment, small but real. He had started to earn their trust, bit by bit, and that meant more than he had expected. Walking beside Avara, he glanced at her and said, "So, how'd I do?" She didn't answer right away, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Finally," she said, "you tried. That's more than I can say for others who came before you." Michael wasn't sure what she meant, but he decided not to press. Instead, he nodded and kept pace with her, feeling a flicker of something that might have been the beginnings of understanding. Days turned into weeks, and Michael gradually found his place among the tribe. Although his presence still drew cautious stares from some, the daily rhythm of life had begun to settle. Rayan and Vecker continued to put him to work, fixing tools, helping to construct shelters, and even gathering food from the surrounding jungle. Avara, ever watchful, served as his reluctant guide and occasional translator when he faltered with the tribe's language. Michael stood with Vecker that morning, sharpening the edge of a wooden blade. "So, what's the deal with these weapons?" Michael asked, holding the blade up to inspect its edge. "They're not metal, but they're still sharp as hell." Vecker leaned back against a tree, watching Michael's work. "Our ancestors learned to shape the hardwood in a way that's stronger than any metal we've found here. The blade absorbs vibrations when it strikes, so it doesn't shatter easily. We don't rely on outside resources, we use what the jungle provides." Michael nodded slowly. "Smart. Back home, we rely on metals, plastics, synthetics. But it sounds like you've got a sustainable system." Rayan approached with a bundle of vines over his shoulder. "Sustainable until something like you shows up." "Come on," Michael said, tossing the blade onto the pile of finished weapons. "You know I'm not here to cause problems. I just want to figure out how to survive and maybe give you a hand." Rayan grunted. "We'll see. Avara seems to think you might be different." "I'm not so sure." "Speaking of Avara," Michael said, standing and wiping his hands on his trousers. "She said she'd show me something about the water purification system today." "Where is she?" Vecker pointed toward the river. "She went that way not long ago. You'll find her at the bend." Michael grabbed his gear and headed off. The jungle was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the calls of unseen creatures, the hum of insects. It was beautiful and alien, but it no longer felt hostile. The longer he spent here, the more he understood the tribe's deep connection to this environment. As he rounded a bend in the river, he spotted Avara crouched by the water's edge. She was scooping handfuls of sand and pouring them into a hollowed-out log, which she had wedged between two rocks. A second log, split and polished to a smooth surface, lay nearby. "Avara," he called, stepping closer. "You wanted to show me something about the water system?" She looked up briefly before returning to her work. "Yes, but you'll need to watch closely and follow my instructions." "I'm good at following instructions," Michael said, kneeling beside her. She handed him a smaller scoop. "Take this and pour sand into the first log. Slowly. Too fast and the filtration won't work properly." Michael followed her lead, pouring the sand in a steady, controlled stream. "So, the sand acts as the filter?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "It catches the impurities. The water drips through the sand and collects in the lower log. Once it's clear, we use it." "Simple but effective," Michael said, watching as the water began to trickle out from the bottom of the first log. He glanced at Avara. "Did you come up with the system?" She shook her head. "It's been used for generations. I only help maintain it." "Well, you're doing a great job," he said. "If I ever get back to Earth, maybe I'll tell my people about this. They could learn a thing or two." Avara paused, her hands resting on the log. "You still think about leaving?" Michael shrugged. "Sometimes. But it's not like I have a ship waiting for me. And even if I did, it's hard to ignore how much I've learned here." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You're different from the others who came before you." "I've heard that a lot," he said. "But what does it mean?" Avara's gaze turned toward the jungle. "Most who come from the stars want something. Resources, power, control. They see our world as a prize. You seem to just be." Then the others could say. "Thanks," Michael said, meeting her eyes. "That means a lot." They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the water and the occasional chirp of a bird. Michael found the rhythm of the task calming, almost meditative. When they finished, the lower log was filled with clear, drinkable water. "You did well," Avara said, rising to her feet. "Thanks," Michael said, standing and stretching. "You know, it's nice not feeling useless for once." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been far from useless. Rayan may not admit it, but you've helped." Michael chuckled. "Well, I'll take what I can get." They walked back toward the village together, the sun filtering through the leaves overhead. For the first time since his crash, Michael felt a small sense of belonging. The tribe's customs, their way of life, he might not fully understand them yet, but he was starting to find his place. When they reached the clearing, Rayan and Vecker were waiting. Vecker held a crude map carved into a piece of bark. "We're heading to the northern grove tomorrow," he said. "We could use another set of hands." Michael nodded. "Sure. What are we looking for?" "Medicinal plants," Avara explained. "The northern grove has a few species we rely on. It's a half-day's walk from here." "All right," Michael said. "What time do we leave?" "First light," Vecker replied. "Don't be late." "I won't," Michael said with a grin. Rayan gave a low grunt. "We'll see if you can keep up." Michael felt a flicker of excitement. He'd grown tired of simply surviving, now he wanted to contribute, to prove he was more than just an outsider. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find something he hadn't even realized he was looking for. The northern grove was a sprawling stretch of dense greenery and twisted trees that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Sunlight filtered down in shifting patterns, creating a dappled glow across the ground. Michael followed Avara and Vecker as they navigated the narrow, winding trails, their movements silent and deliberate. Rayan brought up the rear, keeping a close watch on their surroundings. "This place is like a maze," Michael said, brushing aside a low-hanging branch. "It is," Vecker replied, crouching to inspect a cluster of plants. "If you don't know the paths, you'll walk in circles until you starve." Avara paused ahead, glancing over her shoulder. "Stay close. There are creatures here that don't take kindly to strangers." Michael nodded, gripping the haft of a sharpened wooden spear that Rayan had thrust into his hands earlier. "I'll keep that in mind." The grove was alive with sounds, bird calls, the rustle of leaves, the occasional distant roar of something large and unseen. Despite the lush beauty of the place, a constant sense of unease hung in the air. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though each time he glanced around, there was nothing there. "Do you ever get used to it?" he asked Avara, who was scanning a cluster of red-leaved bushes. "Used to what?" she asked without turning. "The feeling that you're never alone out here," Michael said. Avara plucked a small, orange fruit from one of the bushes and tucked it into her satchel. "You learn to respect it. To understand that the jungle watches just as much as you watch it." "That's comforting," Michael muttered. Vecker chuckled as he moved further into the grove. "Don't worry. If something dangerous is close, you'll hear it." "Great," Michael said. "I'll be sure to scream if I do." Avara smirked faintly, but her attention quickly returned to the task at hand. She knelt by a cluster of dark green ferns, motioning for Michael to join her. "These leaves," she said, pointing. "Look for the ones with 3 distinct veins running through them. Those are what we need." Michael crouched beside her, studying the leaves. "Got it. 3 veins." He carefully plucked one and held it up. "Like this?" She nodded. "Yes. Keep gathering. We'll need plenty." The two worked side by side, picking through the ferns and filling their satchels. Rayan and Vecker were a short distance away, gathering roots from beneath a massive tree with sprawling, gnarled roots that coiled like serpents. "Do you ever come out here alone?" Michael asked quietly. Avara shook her head. "No one does. It's too dangerous." "Because of the creatures?" he pressed. She paused, her gaze drifting into the shadows of the trees. "Not just the creatures. There are stories of those who wandered too far and never returned. Some say the jungle itself took them." Michael raised an eyebrow. "The jungle itself?" Avara glanced at him, her expression serious. "Do not underestimate this place. It is alive in ways you cannot see. It protects itself." Michael studied her face, noting the tension in her jaw. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. "But hey, you've got me here now. And I've been told I'm pretty hard to lose." Avara's lips curved into a faint smile, but she quickly returned to gathering leaves. "Just focus on the task." As they worked, Michael found himself drawn to her more and more. She was fierce and guarded, but there were moments, brief, fleeting, when her defenses lowered and a warmth broke through. He wanted to know her better, to understand her world and her people beyond the practicalities of survival. When their satchels were nearly full, Avara stood and stretched, the dappled sunlight catching the faint iridescence of her skin. Michael rose beside her, brushing dirt from his hands. "That should be enough," she said, securing her satchel. "Good," Michael said, hefting his own. "I was starting to think we'd be here all day." Vecker and Rayan joined them, their own satchels filled. Rayan glanced at Michael. "You didn't mess it up, did you?" "Nope," Michael said with a grin. 3 veins. "I'm learning." Rayan snorted, but there was no malice in it. "We'll see how well you learned when the healers used those leaves." The group began the journey back, retracing their steps through the winding trails. The tension Michael had felt earlier returned, the sensation of unseen eyes following their every move. He tightened his grip on the spear and kept close to Avara, her quiet confidence steadying him. Do you feel that? He asked her in a low voice. Avara glanced at him. Feel what? Like we're being watched, he said. She frowned, scanning the trees. Always. But if you let it control you, you'll never make it back. Michael nodded, forcing himself to stay calm. I'll keep that in mind. The jungle seemed to press in around them as they walked, the shadows growing deeper. When they reached a familiar clearing, Michael let out a quiet sigh of relief. They were close to the village now. The oppressive atmosphere of the grove began to lift, replaced by the more familiar sounds of the settlement, voices, the clatter of tools, and the hum of life. As they entered the village, the elders awaited them in the central square. Avara stepped forward, presenting the satchels of leaves and roots. The elders examined the contents, murmuring among themselves. Michael stood off to the side, watching as Avara spoke in their language, her tone respectful and measured. When she finished, one of the elders looked directly at Michael. You have been learning, the elder said in the melodic, translated tone. This is good. Michael inclined his head. I'm trying. The elder nodded. And you will continue to try. For now, rest. You have done enough today. Michael glanced at Avara, who gave him a slight nod before turning back to the elders. He took it as his cue to step back, letting her handle the rest. As he moved toward his shelter, Rayan and Vecker caught up to him. Vecker clapped him on the shoulder. You didn't do half bad out there, Starwalker. Thanks, Michael said. High praise coming from you. Rayan grinned faintly. Don't get used to it. Michael laughed, feeling a sense of camaraderie he hadn't expected. Despite the challenges and the cultural differences, he was starting to feel like he belonged, like he was part of something bigger than himself. That evening, as the village settled into its quiet nighttime routine, Michael sat outside his shelter, gazing at the stars. Avara approached, her footsteps light but deliberate. You're adapting, she said simply. Michael looked up at her. Thanks to you. You've been patient. Avara shrugged. You're willing to learn. That makes it easier. He studied her face, the way the starlight caught the edges of her features. I mean it. I'm grateful. She hesitated, then sat beside him. You've come a long way since the day you fell from the sky. But there's still more to understand. Michael nodded. I know. I'm not in a hurry. For a moment, they sat in silence, the stars stretching endlessly above them. Michael felt a quiet certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. No longer a lost starwalker, but someone who had found a place and a purpose among a people he was beginning to call his own. Michael was working beside Rayan and Vecker in the main square of the village, carefully stripping bark from a fallen log. They were preparing a new platform to store food, a task that had become oddly satisfying for Michael over the past few weeks. The others still referred to him as a starwalker now and then, but the tone had softened. It was no longer an accusation. You're starting to get the hang of this? Rayan said gruffly as he inspected Michael's work. Michael grinned. Guess I've got a decent teacher. Rayan huffed, but it sounded almost like a laugh. Vecker, sitting cross-legged nearby, was weaving thin branches into baskets. He glanced up, smirking. You've even stopped blunting the blades. A miracle in itself. Give me another week, and I'll be a master craftsman. Michael shot back. Avara approached, carrying a bundle of brightly colored cloth. She set it down next to the growing pile of supplies. You all look busy. Always, Rayan muttered. Not that you'd notice. Avara ignored him and turned to Michael. Can I borrow you for a moment? Borrow me? Michael asked, setting down the tool he was using. Yes, she said, gesturing toward the river. I need to show you something. Michael glanced at Rayan and Vecker. You two can handle things here, right? Rayan waved him off. Just don't wander off into the jungle and get yourself killed. Wouldn't dream of it, Michael said, following Avara. They walked in silence for a while, leaving the central clearing behind. The village sounds faded, replaced by the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant calls of animals. Avara led him to a secluded spot along the river, where the water pooled into a clear, shallow basin. She knelt beside it, motioning for him to join her. What's this about? Michael asked, crouching down. Avara dipped her hand into the water, letting it flow over her fingers. You've been learning our ways, working alongside us. But you still don't understand the heart of who we are. Michael tilted his head. The heart of who you are? She nodded. This place, our home, is more than just a jungle or a village. It's connected to everything we do, everything we believe. We don't see ourselves as separate from it. And you, though you've tried, you still see yourself as a part. Michael frowned, staring into the water. I'm not sure I follow. Avara scooped a handful of water and let it drip back into the basin. You come from a world where people shape their environment to fit their needs. Here it's different. We shape ourselves to fit what the jungle requires. That's the connection you haven't felt yet. Michael watched her, noticing the way her tone softened as she spoke. I've been trying to fit in, he said, to learn your ways. Isn't that enough? She turned to look at him directly, her luminous eyes meeting his. Learning is a start, but you have to feel it, live it, not just understand it in words. Michael thought about her words, then nodded slowly. So how do I feel it? What do I need to do? Avara smiled faintly. That's not something I can teach you. It has to come naturally in time. For now, just listen. To the water. To the trees. To the silence. He let out a soft laugh. Listening, huh? I can do that. They sat quietly for a while, the sound of the river filling the space between them. Michael focused on the rhythm of the water, the way it lapped against the rocks and flowed over the moss. The world seemed to slow, and for a moment he felt a small sense of what Avara was talking about. When he looked at her again, she was watching him with a curious expression. You're not what I expected, she said. Yeah? Michael said, grinning. What did you expect? Someone who would leave at the first chance, she said. Someone who would try to take something from us. Michael shook his head. Not all humans are like that. I'm not like that. I just want to find my place. Wherever that might be. Avara tilted her head. And do you think it's here? He hesitated, then nodded. I think it could be. If you'll let me stay. Her expression softened, and for a brief moment she reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a spark through him. Avara quickly withdrew her hand, her gaze dropping back to the water. Thank you, Michael said, his voice low. For what? She asked, glancing at him. For not giving up on me, he said. For showing me what I couldn't see before. Avara smiled again, just faintly, before standing and brushing off her hands. Come on. There's still work to do. Michael followed her back to the village, the sound of the river still lingering in his mind. That quiet moment by the water had felt different, like a shift he couldn't quite define. Back in the square, Rayan and Vecker were finishing the platform. They looked up as Michael and Avara approached. Learn anything out there, Starwalker? Rayan asked. Michael smirked. Yeah. I learned I've still got a lot to figure out. Rayan chuckled. At least you're honest. The rest of the day was spent completing the platform and preparing supplies. By the time the sun set, the structure stood tall and sturdy, another testament to the combined efforts of everyone in the village. That night, Michael sat outside his shelter, gazing up at the stars. Avara joined him once again, sitting cross-legged nearby. They didn't speak for a long time, just watched the night sky and listened to the faint hum of the jungle. Finally, Michael broke the silence. Do you think I'll ever fully understand this place? The way you do. Avara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. Understanding is not the same as belonging. You don't have to know everything to be part of something. He nodded, letting her words sink in. You've got a way with words, you know that? She smiled, a genuine one this time. And you have a way of asking too many questions. Fair enough, Michael said, laughing softly. I'll try to ask fewer questions tomorrow. Avara tilted her head. Don't stop asking. That's how you grow. For the first time since he'd crashed on this world, Michael felt a quiet contentment. He didn't have all the answers and he didn't need them. What mattered was being here, being part of something, and working toward understanding one day at a time.